When you grade everything together, the driving performance levels are low. So let's talk about mindful driving. Let's bring a solution to the problem, right? We talked about the problem, identified it. Let's think about an actual solution. I'm a solutions type guy. Okay, so yeah, we're gonna shift gears, so to speak. I think I'm funny, shift gears. Hello, everybody, and welcome to Vibing Out with Texany. I'm your host, Texany, aka Mr. World Vibe, and we're back with another Psych Saturdays. Gotta admit, I have to, regret to inform you, it's the last Psych Saturdays. So, it is what it is. We've done a lot, and I love doing Psych Saturdays, presenting you with factual information, studies, all about relevant information that you could use. But yes, it's the last one because season 2 is coming to an end. That's why it's called a season, right? Seasons start, they have to finish. And so season 2 of Vibing Out with Texany here is ending at the end of June. So this is our last Psych Saturdays. I really hope you enjoy it. I wanted to actually choose a topic that really spoke a lot to me. So that's why I chose this topic. And I have a lot of notes, so forgive me, but I really gotta turn and look at my notes and talk to y'all. It's funny when I do things like Topic Tuesdays where I'm just, speaking about personal stories, I can make 2-3 jot notes and that's it. And I can do a whole episode right from my brain. But when it comes to Psych Saturdays, as I alluded to just now, there's a lot of research and I'm not going to memorize research when I can just read it from here and summarize it for y'all. So I'll be going back and looking and explaining to you. So let's start with, why did I choose this topic? Why driving, right? Look at the title of this episode. It's called Driving a Mindful or Mindless Behavior. There's 2 different ways you can drive. You can either drive mindfully or mindlessly. And so I think it's a good time. I think it's a good time to talk about driving in particular because as businesses open, people are going to be commuting more. As, for example, Drive Test opens up to actually do road tests. Y'all know I'm actually a driver examiner at Drive Test. People are going to be taking the road tests. So people are getting ready to drive more and more. And driving is a human activity, right? We don't have autonomous cars yet. It's still a human activity. And as a human activity, it's all about your brain, right? The psychology of driving is so big. It's so important. And yeah, I also do have a mindful driving page where it's just like a passion project where I share, mindful driving tips and tricks and just my own thoughts about mindful driving. It's a whole type of driving that's not really promoted when you look at the standard how to drive kind of thing. It's not really standard in there, but it should be. And we're gonna talk about that first. But first we'll talk about mindless driving. And before that, we'll even talk about what does it mean to be a good or bad driver anyways. So we have lots to do in this episode. But as you can tell, I love driving. It's such an important thing to me. Even as a kid, I loved driving. From Hot Wheels, Need for Speed video games, just sitting in the car and looking at those maps so I could know where I am when my parents were driving. It's always meant something to me. So I'm making this episode out of my own personal interest. And for y'all, it'll be so relevant. On a more serious note, you probably, know somebody, or it might have been you or your family who's been affected by, negative or terrible driving, like a crash or an accident. So we can look at it like that. Driving is just so important. And I have some stats here, just some quick stats to kind of highlight the importance of this issue here. So I got this from a study. We're going to refer to a few studies. This one we'll call study 1. And the study was called The Role of Difficulties in Emotion Regulation on Driving Behavior. So it's from the Journal of Behavior, Health, and Social Issues. We'll call this one Study 1, okay? And if you want the links to any of the studies, just look in the description of this podcast and you can find all those links. I want to make sure you have access to actually learn more information. So yeah, let's get to some stats here. So traffic accidents constitute a global social and economic problem. Of course, everyone drives all around the world. Around 1.24 million people die every year on the world's roads, and another 20 to 50 million suffer non-fatal injuries due to road traffic crashes. So they're also the 8th leading cause of death around the world. First cause of death from young people aged 15 to 29. So you're probably 15 to 29 watching this. Most chances you are. So think about how important learning to drive is, and not just learning, but being the best driver you can. Okay? And why is it so important to be the best driver you can? Because road accidents are preventable. That's the big thing. They are preventable. I got another stat just from a Google search to kind of explain, road accidents happen, deaths happen, but they don't have to. Most of the time, it's from this Google search from the National Highway Transportation Safety Administration, the NHTSA. So they say that most of the time, auto accidents are preventable. Somewhere between 94 and 96% of all motor vehicle accidents are caused by some type of human error. So upwards of 95% of accidents are caused by humans. I think the other 5 to 10%, whatever it is, it's probably mechanical problems with the car. If you're driving and the car just stops working, not much you can do, right? But again, something happens on the road that you couldn't see. But even in that case, most times it's human errors. So that's why it's so important to know how to be the best driver you can, so that you just have a safer experience on the road, whether you're a driver, whether you work to drive, whether you commute to drive. Let's prevent accidents, even things like tickets, and because that affects your insurance and you have to pay more money. And so again, I can't sit here and preach how important it is to drive. If you want more information on driving, like I said, I have an Instagram page at mindful_driving. And that'll give you just more access to learning about driving if you want to know more and just become the best driver you can. And also, before we begin this podcast, before we really get into it, just want to take a chance to thank everybody for being here for season 2. Everybody who's joined the Patreon. Okay, the Patreon is the place to actually fund the podcast. Everybody who's on there, that's the heart and soul of the podcast is the Patreon. It's as cheap as $2, and you're helping this podcast, this community, grow so much. So if you want to help out, if you want to support, it's so cheap, but it goes such a long way, and I appreciate everybody, my 30 plus patrons who are on there. Again, just look in the link in the description. You're going to see the link to join the Patreon. And lastly, the audiobook, How to Vibe Out. An audiobook is coming out. Okay, I'm almost done. I think I'm going to give it a date of June 14th, but be checking on my Instagram. So I'll actually release the official release date of the audiobook on there. So excited to turn it into an audiobook, because I feel like a lot of people are busy nowadays. Let's say you're commuting to work, to school, maybe you're driving. You can press play on the audiobook and you can just take in the ideas so much easier than actually reading it. So I'm excited to get that out, to get that finished for y'all. So again, stay tuned for that. And let's get into the actual bulk of this episode. Let's start with 3 aspects to judge the quality of a driver. So before we even get into mindless and mindful driving and comparing the two, let's talk about what it means to be a driver in general. What are the components to actually driving? If you saw my Instagram post recently, I kind of broke it down for you. From looking at all the research and from my own opinion, I have my own take on the 3 aspects and how important each one is. It's not just 30%, 33%, 33%, 33%. I think some are more or less important than others. So number 1, the basic, is you have to have the knowledge, the theory of driving. When you get your G1 in Ontario, you have to know the theory. So this is the first thing you have to know. And it's about 25% of your actual knowledge in driving is your actual knowledge of the theory. So understanding basic pavement markings. What do the yellow lines mean? What do the white lines mean? Signs. You have to know what all the signs mean. Techniques on how to do things, like when you make a left turn. Have you ever heard of the S technique? It helps you see around a turn before you actually make a turn. So these sorts of things, your knowledge, your theory. Secondly, emotional regulation capabilities. So this is 25% as well. So, and it's very important, is just basically knowing how to control your emotions behind the wheel. And this is a life skill. Your emotional intelligence, you could say, is very important in life when it comes to communicating with people, dealing with situations. But when you're behind the wheel, yes, you have to know how to control your emotions, because we bring a lot of emotions to activities we do, and driving is 100% included. I'm sure you're already thinking about certain emotions that you experience. We're going to refer back to that study one, and I'll just quote them for a sec. They talk about emotional regulation and the importance of that. So it says difficulties in emotional regulation are significantly related to different driving behaviors. Okay, like we're saying, higher difficulties in different emotional regulation abilities were positively and significantly related to anxious, dissociative, risky, and anxious and angry driving. In contrast, lower difficulties in emotional regulation were associated with more adaptive, careful driving. So just goes to show, they're just backing up what we're saying, that your emotions, your ability to actually regulate your emotions when driving will make you a better or worse driver. And I love this study because they break down different types, like they said, anxious, risky. We're going to go through some of the actual driving styles that they list. The anxious driving style, which refers to the proneness to feel anxiety and distress during driving and to express lack of security about his or her driving skills. So this could be someone who just got their license or someone who's learning to drive. They're anxious, and this will affect their driving in a negative way. So their emotions are nervous, I'm scared. This happens on the road tests as well. People come prepared. They have the knowledge of how to drive, but when they get nervous on the test, they make silly mistakes they would not make if they weren't nervous. You can fail because of that. So yes, emotional regulation is anxious driving and being able to mediate or lower that. Risky driving style, which relates to thrill seeking while driving, right? Deliberate violation of safe driving norms and the tendency to engage in risky behaviors such as tailgating other drivers, racing with other drivers, illegal passing, and so on. And this just lines up with the fact that the most death, like the highest cause of death between 15 and 29 year olds are road accidents. Because yeah, when you're young, you want to be more risky. That makes sense. When you're young, you should take more risks, but not when it comes to like road safety, because you're affecting other people's lives and your own. So I don't agree with it, but let's just face the facts. This is a type of driving style, and it makes sense like that young people do that. Unfortunately, they do. So again, that's a driving style that comes with your emotions, because I don't know, people want to drive risky to, I don't know, impress people, show off, feel like they have control, feel like maybe they feel like they have so much control they don't even know the impacts or the consequences. So they just feel like their emotions are like, oh yeah, I feel so great, it makes me feel so alive. No, it might not do that if you're not careful. So that's a driving style as well. The angry driving style, which consists of the tendency to feel irritable, angry, and behave aggressively towards others, such as cursing or flashing lights. How many of our parents have road rage? This is probably what road rage means in the simplest case. And again, you're angry driving, whether you are angry before you start driving or you develop angry feelings because of what's going on the road. That's another style of emotional regulation that you have to be able to handle. And then high velocity driving style, driving fast and to express signs of time pressure. You know, I was thinking about this one earlier. That's why they call it rush hour, right? As there's a certain time of the day when everybody is rushing to work or to home. So yeah, we see a lot of high velocity driving styles. People feel, you can say anxious or stressed, but they just want to get to their destination. So they're willing to do illegal things, to drive faster, because they feel a time pressure. Like, I got to get to work on time, so I'm going to drive fast when I can because I want to get to work on time. So yes, that's an emotional regulation thing. Now that was 25%, right? We have 25% from the theory and the knowledge, 25% from emotional regulation. We kind of just broke down some emotions. Now I think 50%, so 1/2 of your entire driving capabilities comes from this last section, which is attention regulation capabilities. You probably can understand what that means by just me saying that, but let me break it down. The ability to keep one's attention and prioritize their focus on the road. How many people One of my favorite comedians back then, Louis C.K., he has this joke where he says, you look around on the road, literally 100% of people are texting and driving. Literally 100% of people. And it's actually almost true. Like, if you stop at a red light, look to the right of you, they're on their phone. Look to the left of you, they're distracted too. Maybe this person's doing their makeup or looking at themselves in the mirror or talking to somebody in the back seat. Yes, a lot of us are distracted when we're driving. And so back to that study 1, they call it the dissociative driving style, which reflects the tendency to be distracted while driving and commit driving errors due to this distraction. And I was kind of talking about the types of distractions we face. Phones and technology, the biggest one. Doing things like hygiene related, like let's say you're doing your makeup or looking at your face, or conversing with people, dealing with people in the car. That can be very distracting. Passengers, kids in the back seat, babies, pets and stuff. So yeah, we can easily get distracted. And no one's perfect. Like, we all get distracted sometimes when we drive. I'm guilty of that sometimes from time to time as well. But there's also visual attention impairments. And this is especially true for older adults. There's a study, but I'm not going to go into the study, but I will link it in the description. But yeah, they talk about how visual attention impairments happen for older adults most of the time. And this is just lines up with cognitive impairments. When you get older, your brain starts to deteriorate and you have cognitive impairments. You're not really aware of the impairments. So that's why older adults feel like they can drive just as well, but they can't because they have visual attention impairments. And lastly, the other type of attention regulation capability you have to know how to do is to focus on the right things on the road at the right times. For example, you could be coming to a red light, but you're making sure the cars on the left and right are stopping or are stopped, so you're not looking at the light in front of you. Or I see this a lot when you're at a red light and you're turning. Let's say you're turning right. You're checking, is anyone coming? Now the light turns green, but you didn't even notice the light turned green, so you can actually go. People behind you will start honking at you like, why are you not going? Oh, the light's green. Oh, I wasn't even looking there. I was looking somewhere else. So knowing how to regulate your attention to what you need to at a given time, that's also attention regulation. So all that being said, I bet by now you're thinking, you're hearing this, you're like, okay, 25% theory. Yeah, I know most of the theory. Emotional regulation. Yeah, I'm pretty good for the most part. And then attention regulation. Yeah, I'm pretty good. So I just want you to kind of figure out which one of these areas you need the most work in. Again, remember, attention regulation, just not being distracted and focusing on the right thing at the right time, is the most important, in my opinion. Because if you can know how to drive, you can be in a good mood and be 100% like emotionally there. But if you're not looking, things change in the matter of a split second. So that's why I broke it down 25, 50%. But okay, so we've talked about what makes you a good and bad driver. I'm sure you're thinking about where you fit in this, in this grading and this self-assessment you're doing. But let's talk about mindful driving, because if you're not doing any of those things we just mentioned, you're driving mindlessly. And most people on the road are driving mindlessly, right? They might be good at driving, but they're not in the best position to drive. It's always something from time pressure, anger, distractedness, not knowing all the rules. It's always something. That's why we see so many bad drivers, is because it's such a blend of factors. It's like mixes in, and when you grade everything together, the driving performance levels are low. So let's talk about mindful driving. Let's bring a solution to the problem, right? We talked about the problem, identified it. Let's think about an actual solution. I'm a solutions type guy. Okay, so yeah, we're gonna shift gears, so to speak. I think I'm funny, shift gears. So yeah, no one's a perfect driver. Let's just admit that. Even me, we all make mistakes, okay? But here's the thing, if you know what mindful driving is, you can keep these things in mind. And when you're driving, you can be like, oh yeah, I'm supposed to do this. Oh yeah, my emotions matter. Oh yeah, I shouldn't be distracted on this. So you can remind yourself to be the best driver you need to be. And in time, you'll form a habit of just being a better and better driving over time. So what is mindful driving? Many of you who follow my Instagram page, Mindful Driving, you might know by now, but there's actually a definition. So Solon McLean, he describes it, and this is from an article on psychologytoday.com. Amazing website for like the latest psychology information. They have an article called "Can You Meditate While Driving?" So Mr. McLean here, he describes mindful driving to be bringing our full attention to the act of driving. Simply put, actually doing what we're doing. It's the opposite of our tendency to drive mindlessly, miss exits, be distracted on our phone, etc. And so you could have guessed that by now, but it's so true. Like, mindfulness in of itself is a skill. If you're mindful in your day-to-day life, then you're mindful when you're driving. I'm sure you are. Because it's not something you can just decide, oh, I'm going to be mindful right now, but I'm not going to be mindful later. It's so tough to practice, but it's so important. I was talking to a friend about being mindful, I think just a few days ago, and I was telling her, like, if I sit here and cut these strawberries mindfully, I'm just like sitting there, cutting them individually, taking my time and appreciating the moment. Yeah, mindfulness is, you can apply it to anything, is what I'm saying, from cutting strawberries to driving. My definition of mindful driving is pretty much the same, a practice of using present-minded and focused thinking towards driving. And let's go back to that first study, because in their different types and styles of driving, they have some positive styles that we can kind of expand on what mindful driving means. They say that there's a type of driving called distress reduction driving style, which refers to the tendency to engage in relaxing activities during driving in order to reduce distress feelings, such as meditate, okay? There's also the patient driving style, which describes or reflects the tendency to be courteous and respectful towards other drivers, to feel no time pressure during driving, and to display calmness while driving. How do you do that when most people around the road are rushing all over the place, especially if you live in the GTA? Here's a tip. Leave earlier. You have work at 7:30. You leave at 7 because it takes you 25 minutes to get to work. Leave at 6:45. Leave earlier so you get to work on time always and you don't have to rush. Give yourself a reason to not feel that time pressure and watch how much better your driving gets just knowing you don't have to rush. Your driving gets so much better. Do you ever go on drives by yourself when you're feeling, you're feeling down or you're bored and you're like, you know what? I just want to go for a drive. And you just drive wherever your heart takes you. In that case, you don't have any time pressure. So you'll notice like your driving is just like way more relaxed. You feel more relaxed. You're enjoying the drive. You're in the moment. You're present-minded. You're mindful. See what I did there? See how we got there? From just taking away that time pressure. That's such a big one. They also talk about the careful driving style, which represents the tendency to be careful while driving, including planning ahead, attention to road, and keeping the traffic rules. So let's put together distress reduction, patient driving style, and careful driving style. All those three things are kind of fit under the umbrella of mindful driving. And another point, like, why is mindful driving so important? Why do I talk about this so much? Why do I preach about mindful driving when we can just learn regular driving? I think we should look to the future, because a lot of companies, services, businesses, they build their models based on future projections. You have to live in the future when you start a business, because you have to be solving a problem that is either here now or will always be here. And I think bad driving is always here. But when you look in the future, are we going to be driving anymore? I don't think so. I think autonomous driving is coming. I don't know how fast, because there's a lot of problems. There's a lot of bugs to fix. There's a lot of ethical problems. But it's coming. It is. Have no doubt. And when we have drivers on the road that are driving in autonomous cars and we have to drive with them, if we want to drive beside, next to really, really well driving cars, we have to make sure our level of driving is higher than it is now, because overall right now it's not that good, at least in some areas of Ontario, especially the GTA. So yeah, I definitely think that learning mindful driving will increase your actual driving level. And let's go back to that first study, because they, at the end of their findings, they talk about what to do with their findings going forward. So here's what they say. The present study suggests that a relevant issue to consider when assessing candidates to obtain or renew their driving license, that's what I do, okay, might be to include not only physical and psychological examination, but also emotional skills. So they're suggesting looking at someone's emotional capabilities will be an important thing to help assess if a person should drive or not. And I agree, right? They also go on to say it would be interesting to assess whether intervention strategies aim to increase emotional awareness or mindfulness, for example, and emotional acceptance, which we will have to talk about. So acceptance-based interventions are helpful in reducing feelings of anxiety and distress experienced by dissociative and anxious drivers. So they're saying maybe mindfulness and emotional acceptance is important, finding strategies to incorporate those into driving. Now, emotional acceptance. This is a big one. This helps drivers deal with road rage. And because road rage, we see it happen, like I said, it's usually our parents. I think it's like an older generation type thing. But at the same time, we all get mad sometimes from time to time. People do dumb things and we pass them and we look at them like who is that? But let's admit, right? Here's an emotional based acceptance strategy that we can tell ourselves. This person messed up, right? And when they drove, they made a stupid error. But we also make mistakes when we drive. True? Yes, very true. Even though I feel like I'm a great driver, I also make mistakes. And I have to be like, sorry, sometimes. Like it happens from time to time. So let's admit, no one's a perfect driver. So when someone makes a mistake, the emotional acceptance should say, well, they're a human, I'm a human, we all make mistakes when we drive. Maybe they're in a rush to the hospital. We just don't know what they're going through. But if nobody crashed, it's fine. Accept it. Let your emotions come back down. And that's how you deal with your emotional regulation skills in that moment. So let's look at one more study, okay? And it's called Mindfulness Predicts Less Texting While Driving Among Young Adults, Examining Attention and Emotional Regulation Motives as Potential Mediators. So this study is right in line with what we're talking about. And I just chose a study to again, support the idea of mindfulness and how that helps incorporates better driving. So their findings were, they supported the hypothesis that individuals lower in mindfulness tended to report more frequent texting and driving. In addition, findings suggested that this relationship was explained by individual differences in emotional regulation motives. Okay, so yeah, that's what they're saying is being able to be mindful. The better you do that, the less you'll be texting and driving, right? And yeah, they also say at the end, mindfulness-based interventions could be developed to prevent texting while driving. So they're also preaching and suggesting incorporate mindfulness into driving. And I forgot to mention, this is from the Personality and Individual Differences Journal. So that study too, you'll see it in the description if you want to learn more. But at the end of the day, I really just want to nail that point home, is that understanding what mindful driving is, why it's important, and to aim to be in that mode when you drive, because that's the difference between a decent everyday driver and a really, really good driver. It's not just knowing more about the rules, that's only 25%. It's the emotional regulation and, most importantly, the attention regulation. And all those things are going to be better when you're mindful. So find ways to be mindful in your life as a whole. Learn about it, practice it, whether you're cutting strawberries, whether you're brushing your teeth, whether you're having a conversation with somebody and you want to be mindful and just be present, just listen to them, right? But bring it to your driving. If you have any questions about how to do that, hit me up, message me on Vibing Out WT, or follow the mindful_driving page. And yeah, we can help you out and give you some strategies, some tips. I'm always here to help. I hope you enjoyed this Psych Saturdays. There's so many more you can go back and check out. We definitely might have to bring this into season 3. So let me know how you liked the episode. Share it with somebody that you think might enjoy it. Let me know how you liked it. And yeah, I appreciate all your support so far. I'll see you guys in our next episode. We have a few left in season 2. I'm so excited. And yeah, I'll see you guys next time, okay? This has been Vibing Out with Texany. I'm your host, Texany, aka Mr. World Vibe. And I'm signing out. Peace.